Can you tell us a little bit of how your family got involved in Saxenburg, and maybe also a little bit of history of the farm itself is always, that's always interesting to our listeners.
So the farm itself dates back to 1963. So it is actually one of the oldest estates in South Africa. And the name also Saxenburg exists already since 1707, because the first owner was von Sax, and then it went on to the De Burgh brothers, and they kind of combined their names, and that's why it's called Saxenburg. And also the first wines were planted there in 1707 already. And it was always used for wine or mining. Actually, Saxenburg has a lot of, had a lot of silver and granite, of course, and zinc. And so it always went between the two over its history and its course. Then my family purchased the estate in 1989. My father always had our family has been in the wine for 5 generations already. And my father traveled extensively through South Africa with his brother, who actually was studying at UCT back in the days. And he had a huge passion and love for South Africa and the land. And he just saw an opportunity because, South Africa was closed off, and he's always wanted to have a wine estate, and he saw an opportunity in South Africa at the time for him like no other country, where the terroir was exceptional, but it wasn't opened up internationally yet, and he knew he could be part of a change. And so he traveled there in 1988, and he looked at a few wine estates, and he didn't actually find any. And then on his way to the airport, he stopped on Saxenburg, and he said when he entered it, it was like entering home, and he immediately knew that was the farm. And once the terroir analysis was done, it was a perfect match. And so my parents purchased the wine estate in 1989, and then we're actually one of 5 children. So it's Vincent, and then I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters. And my parents moved us over all in 1991 and committed 100% to Saxenburg. And I think the 90s was very much focused onto replanting, because actually when Saxenburg was taken over, it was in a very derelict estate, and it was, we would say, a lump of coal, which we then tried to turn into a lump of gold. And it was actually planted mostly with Chenin, Riesling, and Cinsault at the time. And I would say 90% of that was pulled out and replanted, and the estate was. The estate itself is 200 hectares, and nearly 100 hectares were planted. And they didn't follow trends at the time at all, but they went with what their terroir has to offer. And they set their own trends in the time, especially in the 90s. I would say they were trendsetters, that they then planted Shiraz, which was very uncommon in the early 90s. But, Saxenburg is the ideal location for Shiraz. The whole top of Saxenburg is a decomposed granite field. And so that actually became our main varietal. And then our first winemaker back in the day, in the 90s, was Van Rensburg. And then they got Nico van der Merwe on board. And then he was out throughout the whole 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. And, then in 93, Saxenburg won, I think, 5 double golds in the Veritas and a General Smuts Award. So it catapulted Saxenburg, I would say, on the map. And so that was in the 90s. It was all about, making a reputation and replanting and building the brand Saxenburg. And in the 2000s, we very much concentrated when the market was open on growing internationally. So I would say that's a very short history of Saxenburg.
Right.